It's time to bounce back beyond tomorrow and kickstart with our 2020 Women in Gaming Ice Africa campaign, with our very first interview being with the MD of Clarion Gaming, Ms.Kate Chambers. Good day everyone and welcome to Ice Africa Women in Gaming. Today we are interviewing the MD of Clarion Gaming, Ms.Kate Chambers. Hi and welcome, Kate.
Hi Naz, lovely to see you.
It's amazing seeing you all the way in the UK.
I know, it's the wonder of modern technology, isn't it? Who would have thought? We never did this before, but this pandemic actually has given us some good things, along with maybe some lots of good things. So yeah, I'm all Zoom ready.
Okay, you mentioned the pandemic has brought the live event industry to a halt, with many organizers turning towards digital events, much like we are having this conversation via Zoom. What has surprised you about holding digital events, and what positives can you and other event organizers take from such a challenging period?
Oh, that's the eternal question. And I think if we had done all this before, then it's like that $64 million Jeopardy question, isn't it? I think that we've been lucky at Clarion Gaming because we have a publishing arm and we have a training arm, and we were developing virtual training anyway, virtual classrooms. So we were sort of one step ahead, which enabled us to go to market quite quickly and replace our live events that we had to postpone with virtual events. I think one of the biggest lessons that I've learned, and maybe my team's learned, is to keep it simple. Particularly in the beginning, to get your message out, you need to make these things easy to interact with, not overcomplicate it, and also recognize that it is different. It's not a live event, it's a virtual event, and to keep people engaged for long periods of time is very difficult on a computer. It's slightly different in a live environment because people can wander off, sit quietly, go and have a coffee. Although they are still in that live event, for me to have a break, I've got to go downstairs, make a coffee, I'm away, I'm not interacting at all. So keeping it simple and managing the content in chunks that allow people to concentrate for that period of time is really key, I think. So does that answer your question, Naz?
Yes, it does, because I think we've heard a lot about Zoom fatigue and webinar fatigue, and that's certainly something that we really do not want our audience and our stakeholders to have to endure.
I think also in the beginning that we were probably one of the first to come out with virtual events. Like I said, we'd sort of were doing it anyway, just not on the scale that we were about to do it. And we saw our engagement numbers shoot up, and they were double or treble what we would normally have expected for a virtual event or a webinar or anything like that. But actually it's soon after a couple of months of lockdown. So I suppose we locked down in March, April. So as soon as we started to get into May, what we saw was the engagement levels drop off. And I think that's because you're quite right, Zoom fatigue somewhat. But also I think there was so much more information out there and everyone was trying to keep their brands alive that actually the choice was vast. And I think us keeping it simple and keeping the quality really high certainly allowed us to maintain and I suppose get to a point where our engagement was fairly level, which is great.
That's phenomenal, actually. So, Kate, with Ice Africa 2020 taking place digitally, what opportunities does this offer for the event and those that will be taking part in the event?
I think digital events in a continent like Africa could be actually something pretty astounding. I think, if you, as you, Naz, keep reminding me, Africa is a vast continent. And trying to put on an event which allows all those countries to get involved is I suppose, tactically challenging. And it has been. How many years have we run the event now? Is it 2 or 3? I think 3 years?
This year would have been our third year, yeah.
So trying to get people to travel from Egypt, from Cairo, all the way down to Johannesburg, actually don't underestimate the distance that is, and the flight times, and logistically how complex that is with visas. It's just like going, flying long haul. So I think running a virtual event as we are is going to potentially allow a much broader audience to get involved and to really benefit from the engagement and the information that we can push out. So I would expect actually the numbers to grow at a virtual event, particularly on a continent like Africa. And I think this one, acknowledging the fact that English is not everyone's first language in Africa, that allowing us to translate it, particularly into French, to engage French-speaking Africa is certainly a plus. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how we can transform the event to make sure it reaches into all the corners of Africa. I think there's a lot of corners in Africa too.
Super excited for Ice Africa Digital. Kate, with organizations around the world taking real action on issues of cultural and general diversity, I think one thing personally that stands out for me is that I'm accepted within Clarion Gaming, team in London, and we don't see that. We see humans, and that's what I love about working at Clarion. How is Clarion planning to continue to develop and improve in these areas that most organizations still need to take real action against?
Now, it's a really hard subject, and I think that a lot of companies struggle to know where to start. And what they do is they trust their employees to make the right choices. But we're all individuals, and we're all somewhat, I suppose, our backgrounds and the way that we grew up and where we come from creates a way of thinking and acting that we're not aware of. And it's that unconscious bias which actually we all need to look at. We can see a conscious bias because that's the very obvious selection of men over women.
Yeah.
Selection of the colour of your skin or religion or sexual orientation, and we can see it because it's voiced. It's the unconscious bias which I think is a tougher one, because actually we don't know we're doing it.
Yeah.
And I think it takes sometimes uncomfortably someone to point something out that they see. But I also think it's we need to recognise that not everything should be taken in the way that it sounds, that actually inquiring where someone is from actually may not be racism.
Yeah.
Actually may be a genuine desire to understand someone's background so that they can be more inclusively welcomed into a team. Yeah. And that's certainly, I love to travel. My parents took me as a child all over the world traveling during school holidays, and I'm naturally inquisitive and want to understand people, because just like you feel welcomed, it makes people feel welcome if we can understand sometimes where culturally people are coming from. Not make allowances for them, but actually understand what they mean behind the words. And I think that's hugely important. And I certainly don't think that we should recognise people for any form of beliefs, whether it be where they're from, the colour of their skin, religion, gender, anything. Actually, we should see them as human first and treat everyone the same and give everyone the advantages that we would give anyone else. Some people say we should recognise the fact that someone's black first before looking at them, for example, as a human. And actually, I don't agree with that. I think that we should recognise everyone as equal, regardless of who they are or where they come from. So that's just sharing a little bit of my personal beliefs.
Yeah.
But in terms of how we're dealing with that at Clarion, it's obviously a big and complex subject. And Clarion as a company has employed an outside agency to come in and guide us through this process. And we had the first meeting last week, actually, where members of all the teams, I think it may be just the London team, I'm not sure whether you guys were involved, but certainly in London, representatives from all the divisions across Clarion were invited to the inevitable Zoom call. I think it was about 6 of my team that joined up in the call, and a mix of people too, genders, where they come from, backgrounds, religions, sexual orientation. They all went because actually I think there's a genuine desire to make Clarion a welcoming place for anyone, that we recruit diversely and that everyone is given the same advantages across the board. So that program of talking will continue. And actually I was on a diversity call a couple of weeks ago, and people saying, oh, you know, we need to continue to talk. And yes, talking's good, but in reality now, as we've been talking for 200 years about a lot of these subjects, at some point, somebody needs to do something. Yeah. So, and they may be incremental changes, but I think Clarion has a genuine desire to make some changes to the way that we are and the way that we act, rather than just talk. Yeah. There's a lot of talk. Yeah. But actually there does need to be some peaceful, considered action, I think, particularly in business.
Agreed.
So that was a long answer. Sorry about that.
No, but it was a concise answer. It was a well-received answer, because I can resonate to everything that you just said. You know, I mean, when you speak from your personal experiences, it makes you that much more relatable. And I relate to a lot of that you've said. I mean, growing up being mixed race myself, growing up in Africa, and my parents coming from various cultural and religious backgrounds, I myself see humans first. So I completely agree with your sentiments, and I resonate with it. Now, Kate, last year we held the very first live Women in Gaming breakfast, and it's very rare that the MD of Clarion Gaming gets up to say a few words, and I think that was the highlight of the breakfast. Are there any parting words that you'd like to leave for all the women in gaming, not just in Africa, but globally?
I think that us as women need to stay strong. We need to stand up for our beliefs and be confident in our abilities. I think the only female MD that runs a big division in Clarion globally. I've got there through hard work. I'm never one that, interestingly, I'm never one that shouts about my achievements particularly. I always think achievements should stand up for themselves. However, that is, you know, if you go and join particularly the Global Gaming Women group, that they say, oh no, you know, you should talk about them more, be more like a man. And actually I find that hard, because I'm not a man, I'm a woman. So my inherent characteristics of being a woman come to the fore naturally. But actually isn't that part of the point, is that women themselves have something to bring that's different from men. So if we all start acting like men, then actually, you know, more women might get noticed, but actually we're just doing the same thing as men, and that's actually not the point. However, I do think that we need to make our voice heard a little more, and not be so reticent about networking like men do, and talk a bit more about what we've achieved. And women tend to say we, my team, and actually when it's appropriate we should say I think this. And be proud of that, actually, and not be too scared. I think the pandemic's actually helped a little bit in this, because you have to be a bit more forceful on a Zoom call to be heard, because there's a lot of distractions, and I think maybe I've honed my skills over the last 4 months maybe a little bit.
Very first time I met you, and I sat there completely astounded, like, wow, and it certainly did inspire and motivate me as well as a woman. And you're 100% right. As women, we need to be heard. We don't have to be like men. We can do it ladylike, because the reality is we are still women. Thank you very much for joining us today, Kate, all the way from the UK. And it's been an absolute pleasure to have a few minutes of your time. And I hope that you are keeping safe. So stay safe, stay blessed, and we will catch up soon.
Perfect. Thank you, Naz.
Kate. Stay tuned to our social media pages and website as we interview a lineup of phenomenal women in gaming from all parts of Africa. Bounce back beyond tomorrow. Ice Africa Digital, from the 27th to the 29th of October 2020. We'll catch you online.